When working with watercolor, you're going to want to paint from light to dark. So you're starting with your lightest colors first. You can start with any light color, but I'm going to start with yellow and kind of paint, because there's a lot of yellows in my still life, and also paint where there's light highlights, because the yellow will work. I'll be using yellow with violet to make my neutral tones. But for the first layer, all I'm using is yellow, and I'm lightening the yellow with water. But you can tell that I don't have a lot of water on my brush because I don't want the watercolor to be runny. I want it to be where I can easily spread it nice and smoothly, but it's not running out of my lines and into places where I don't want it to be. I'll leave some of the white of the paper showing through. There'll be the areas where I don't really want yellow, where I'm going to maybe use some duller tones or some darker tones. But I'll use yellow first all over my paper, and I'll let it dry. It's really important with watercolor to let it dry in between all the layers. This way you don't get running where you don't want it, and you can really get detail that way. It's very hard to get detail on wet. Now that I've got my layer of yellow, I'm going to be adding the teeniest, tiniest bit of violet. Because my watercolors is a mix, I'm using a mixing tray of watercolors, I have to mix my violet, which is magenta and blue. And then I'm going to take the tiniest bit and mix it in with my yellow. And I'm going to add that to the shadows and the duller areas. You can see it is slightly different. And again, I can't stress that when working with watercolor, you are going to want to build your color up from light to dark a little tiny bit at a time. Now I'm adding a tiny bit of orange. There are some orange tones. There's an actual orange right here. So I'm going to put a nice first coat of orange on there. I'll be working it to a deeper, darker tone, but that's my first coat. There's a little bit of orange on the pear, and there's some orange tones in the basket. Okay, now I'm going to start adding my color. So this is an apple, so I'm going to paint that with a pretty strong orange red. And I have to mix my violet and my orange to get a nice red. I did put a little too much paint on there, so be careful. It was a little too much. And I'll use green for the apple, and I'll start putting in some violet, violet for the shadows and the grapes. I'm mixing violet with yellow. So I'm mixing the complementary color of yellow, which is violet, to create the shadows. It's almost like a brown or a gray. The end of this video will be my first coat of my whole paper. I will be letting it dry overnight, and then I'll be applying a second layer of color.